Hi, this is Becky Young from Grossman, Young and Hammond, and I'm here with attorney Ron Karp. Ron is the former president of the Trial Lawyers Association here in Washington, D.C., and he is a litigator with 4 decades of experience, and he works on insurance litigation. And we asked Ron to join us today because many of our clients run businesses and their businesses have been closed due to the pandemic. A lot of these businesses bought business interruption insurance, which they thought would cover them during a situation like this, but unfortunately they have learned in some cases that it won't, or that the insurance companies are denying their claims. And so we asked Ron to come today to talk to us about business interruption insurance and what remedies might be available if your insurance carrier denies a claim. So Ron, thank you so much for joining us today. I was hoping you could start by telling us what is business interruption insurance and what type of businesses usually carry it.
Business interruption insurance, Becky, is typically insurance that every business should have, which protects them in the event that their business is interrupted due to a hurricane, a flood, a fire, something along those lines, which causes them to shut down and lose profits. Now, of course, with the COVID emergency, people are looking into whether or not they have coverage to deal with being shut down in the middle of this horrible pandemic.
Right, so I would think that a global pandemic would be sort of a prime example of when businesses would call upon business interruption insurance, but what's actually happening right now in that regard?
What's happening now, for example, the first lawsuit was filed in Louisiana on behalf of a very popular restaurant down there that has been shut down due to the virus. And Lloyd's of London is the defendant. And they're arguing that they can't operate because they were essentially shut down by the state. And in Washington, D.C., there was a recent lawsuit filed by multiple restaurants against Erie Insurance, who provided business interruption insurance. And what typically is happening is insurance companies are taking the position that they never intended to insure for something like the coronavirus because they couldn't have anticipated it. Now, if anybody who has a policy should certainly look into it and consider making a claim against their insurance carrier. It's really important to see whether or not there's an exclusion in these policies for the virus. For example, after the Ebola virus and after the SARS virus, many insurance companies started inserting exclusions which specifically said we will not cover any loss that's as a result of a virus. So the first thing people need to look at, and we've been looking at lots of these policies, is whether or not the exclusion exists. Some policies were written without the exclusion, particularly something that's called an all-risk policy, which insurance companies sold to their clients, policyholders, and collected premiums for years saying, look, whatever the problem is, if your business is interrupted, we'll cover you. And these policies did not include an exclusion for an epidemic or virus. But, and those policies are, it seems to me, are good cases and people should be compensated for. But not all policies are all risk policies. And as I said, you have to look at the policy to see whether or not you have a specific exclusion.
So what remedies might be available under the law to companies who have these business interruption policies and have had claims denied?
Well, the remedy would be to file a lawsuit in court and sue the company for breach of contract, basically stating that for years you've been paying premiums, which they've been happy to collect. And now that you need them to step up to the plate and stand behind you, they've breached their policy by denying the claim. And then the court will have to determine whether there's coverage under the policy and whether it was appropriately denied.
And how can you and your firm help businesses who are in this situation?
Well, what we've been doing is looking at their policies, free of charge, just to determine whether or not they have coverage. We don't want to take a case in which the policy clearly has a virus exclusion. And then if we determine that there is coverage, we would file the case on a contingent fee basis, meaning if we don't collect anything, we're not going to charge anything. We realize that most businesses at this point can't afford an attorney by the hour. They can't, most of them are totally shut down. I mean, I've talked to medical practices that were shut down cold. I mean, dental practices, for example, aren't seeing anybody. Surgical practices, unless it's an emergency, they can't see anybody. They've been shut down. Any business really that has been affected by this has been shut down cold. So they have no income and they can't afford to hire a lawyer by the hour to pursue these cases. So if we find an appropriate case, we would do it on a contingent fee.
Well, thank you very much for answering my questions about business interruption insurance. I think this is really helpful information for our clients and other businesses in the area that have been impacted by COVID-19. And I really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks again.
Our pleasure, sure.